to another episode of the Southern Gal's Kitchen. We're going to make some pizza sausage rolls today, and we're going to talk about how to grind your own flour from grain. Got some wheat grain here, and tell you just a simple, easy process for doing that. And then we'll talk about some of the equipment you may or may not want to have. So sit back, and this is going to be a step-by-step show on how to mill some flour and how to make sausage pizza rolls. To mill your own flour, I buy wheat in bulk, and you can let me show you a closer view of it. This is red winter wheat or hard red wheat, and then you can buy soft winter wheat, soft summer wheat. You know, it grows in the spring, the summer, or the winter. There's just all different kinds of grains. I use einkorn grains and spelt berries and just rye flour, rye grains. All kinds of grains you can make your own flour. You can make flour in a lot of different ways, but one of the ways you can make it, if you have a wheat mill, a flour mill, you can mill it. But if you have a Vitamix, you can get a special container. It's called a dry container for grains and peanut butter, and you can make your own. Now this does heat up a little bit more than some of the grain mills will heat up quite a bit. Some of them heat up a lot less, and heating it up does destroy a little bit of the nutrients. But you might ask, why do you want to grind your own grain? You can buy whole wheat, you can buy organic whole wheat. And the reason you want to grind your own grain is because when flour is milled, within 24 hours, it starts losing a lot of nutrition. 20% of it will be gone. Now you can refrigerate it and keep it 2 or 3 days. You can freeze it, which is what I do when I'm milling flour. I'll make some extra and then I'll just put it in the freezer. Then it will keep there. I've kept it, some say a month, most say 6 months. I've kept mine for a year. It's frozen in a little Ziploc bag. I've never had any problem with it. So you're getting, when you mill the grain and use it right away or freeze it or refrigerate it, you're getting all the nutrition of the grain. When you buy whole wheat, even if it's organic, like I said, you've lost 20%. So this has all the zinc and selenium and protein and vitamins that are built into our grains. Those are the things that build our immune systems. They keep us healthy. They give us energy. And obviously when you buy just white flour at the store, all the bran and everything's been sifted out, so you're not getting much at all. You get a few synthetic grains, and that's why the American diet is so poor. A lot of people don't even eat grains anymore, and there's low gluten grains too, like einkorn. We'll talk about those at another show. But eating grains on some level, if they're whole grains and they're milled fresh, you're getting the things that your body needs. A whole host of B vitamins, like I said, and selenium and zinc and magnesium and so many grains. So there's a lot of advantage to milling your own grains and using it that day or within the next day, or keep it in the refrigerator a day. Beyond that, I'd probably freeze it. So we're going to start with milling. I don't mill because this does heat up in hot grains or starts killing off nutrients, and you don't want to do that. I'll take about a half to 3/4 of a cup of grain, and that's all I'm going to grind at a time. Now this is noisy, so I'm not going to run it through the whole process, but I'm going to show you how that works. A Vitamix does a pretty good job if you don't have a food mill, and that you have to have a high-speed blender such as a Vitamix or a Blendtec, because a regular blender will not grind your grains. You'll just tear your blades up on your grains, and you don't want to I wouldn't do this in a regular Vitamix container. You can really burn your blades pretty fast, so this is best. Now the stone ground is the absolute best way to mill, but we'll talk about that on another show. This is just if you've got one of these. We'll turn it on. Run for 1 minute, so I count 1 little second, 2 little seconds, I just count in my head, 3 little seconds. You can also set a minute on your phone, and that grinds a minute, and then you're ready for your flour. It's made into flour. Now this flour I've already ground up. I ground it up a little bit earlier today, and you can see it's fine just like flour. Get a close-up shot of that. But it's nice flour. A cup of grains, wheat grains, will make about a cup and a fourth to a cup and a half of flour. Now, to get some of the bran out, now you can use this flour as just whole wheat flour. But today I'm going to make pizza dough, and I wanted it a little bit lighter. So you can do two things. The fastest way is to, in your recipe, use half of your whole wheat and half of just A&P flour from this, normal flour that you buy that's already milled out. Because that way you've got still 50% of all the nutrients added back to the flour. That's a good way to do it, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to sift some of this out, as I did today, you take this, and I took it a little bit at a time. I don't try to sift too much at a time because it's too hard to sift. Now this is just a little cheapy sifter you can buy anywhere. It's a fine mesh. I'm going to order, they have pans that are 8 and 10 and 12 inches. They come in 40, 30, and 50 different variants of how fine you can grain. I'm ordering those, and I'll try them and I'll let you know. But the bran, I've already sifted this out, but there'll be some bran left in there, and I just throw that away, or you can save it for make bread muffins or something like that. I don't always throw it all away, but I did today. So that's all you do. Then I'll sift that back and forth to a bowl from bowl 8 or 10 times, and that pretty much gets a lot of the bran out. It's not going to get it all out. You still have a lot of good nutrition here. But then this is ready to use. Got our flour milled, we're going to start making our pizza. And let me kind of tell you the ingredients. We're going to use 1 1/4 teaspoons of yeast. It is not instant yeast, it's active dry yeast. And we're going to put it into 1 1/3 cups of water. This water is warm to the touch. You don't want it hot, you don't want it cold. Just warm to the touch. Too cold, your yeast won't activate. Too hot, it'll kill it. So we're going to put in 1 1/4 teaspoons into our water, and we have to let that, what they call, bloom. It has to become active, and you'll see that it's active because it'll start bubbling up. It doesn't bubble up, your yeast has gone bad. I keep yeast, I buy it in jars, keep it in the freezer, keeps for a long, long time, but I still want to test it. And I'm going to put in 1/4 teaspoon of I use cane sugar, but sugar, and we're going to stir that up. And then just let it set about 5 minutes and see if it blooms. If it doesn't bloom in 5, you could add a little more sugar sometimes, and yeast eats sugar, and that might activate it. You could also use a little bit of honey in there if you wanted to instead of sugar. See what else is in this pizza dough that's starting to get ready to bubble. We're going to use the yeast when it's activated with 1/4 cup of olive oil, 1 3/4 cup of that AP flour I was talking about, because we're going to use some of that to lighten up our dough, and then we're going to use 1 1/2 cups of the whole wheat that I ground of this. So we're going to use both. Again, you could do that different ways, but that's what we're going to do today. We're going to use 1 1/2 teaspoons of salt. And as you know, I grind my own sea salt. So it's really, I've got this finely ground, so I'm going to go ahead and measure out it's wet, don't want to use that. 1.5 teaspoons. This is 1/4, so I'm going to do 5 of them. That's our salt. We'll use that. You don't want to mix the salt in with the yeast. You want them separate. Because salt, some people say it doesn't kill the yeast, some people say it does. I've always gone with the idea that it would, because that's what everybody used to say. I do see people saying now that it won't. I don't know. I still put mine in separate. Most professional bakers that I've watched will put it in separate too. You can use instant yeast now, and you don't have to go through this blooming process. I don't mind instant yeast for pizza dough. I don't necessarily use it for bread doughs because it rises faster, and the slower you rise on a bread dough, the better it's going to be. Okay, we're going to make our pizza dough now. This is bloomed up. That means it's bubbling. You can let this set 10 minutes or so, but you do want it to bubble. And I'm going to use my stand mixer because it's a lot easier. You can do this by hand, but it takes about 8 minutes to knead. to talk to you just a minute about using your stand mixer to make your dough in some level, but they're not really made with a big enough motor to do high-powered, heavy-duty bread. I've made bread in them for years, but I take some precautions, and this is what I do. And you need to do it with this dough as well. You turn it on and you let it mix until it starts pulling away from the sides. And when it gets mixed, and even if you feel any tug on that motor or it's sounding like it's tugging, stop there, take it out and knead it by hand. But generally you can make it in here. Once I get it mixed and it's pulling away from the sides, I'll turn it down to about 1, might try 2, but 1 or 2 for about 7 or 8 minutes. When it pulls away from the sides and forms up on that dough hook, at that point it's well kneaded. Now you can buy heavy-duty bread dough hook mixers, and they work great. You can do up to 6 loaves at one time in a lot of them. You just have to research, do your homework, but if you're just making bread a loaf at a time, these will work for you. You can make your pizza dough, you can make this dough entirely by hand. You just have to knead it usually 7 or 8 minutes. But that slow kneading will work for you. Your mixer will do the work. If it starts pulling or sounding like it's too much on the motor, it's going to depend on what size motor you have too. And go by your manufacturer's directions. But I've done bread in here for 20 years, and I've never had any trouble. But if I see it pulling, I don't go off and leave it. If I see it pulling, I'm going to take it out on a lightly floured surface, and I'm going to finish that kneading by hand. When I do my butterhorn rolls, and I'll make those for you, it's such a big dough. My original recipe makes like 60 rows. 6 times 48 rows, I'm sorry. But I cut it in half a lot of times when I don't need that much. When all the kids are here and grandkids, I make the whole batch. But a lot of times I'll cut that in half and make about 24 rows. But even that can be a little heavy on this. So I'll mix it in here and start it, and then I'll put it down and finish it on the counter. You can also use a bread machine. I have one. I used to use it a lot, but I just don't like getting it out and putting it back up. I don't have a place to leave it out like I do my other things. So if you have a place and you want to use that, I only do the dough setting on the bread machine, and I never run it through the whole cycle. I don't like it as well. But you can just use it to mix your dough. It may not mix real large batches of dough. You might just want to do 1 loaf at a time and kind of go by those recipes that make 1 loaf. So you just have to keep all that in mind. You can do this whole process, like I said, by hand. Good arm workout, nothing wrong with that. We all need that more. But be careful with your mixers. And if you've got one of them heavy duty, I think you know what I'm talking about. I don't want to give brand names, but they have like double hooks and they spin. You can make 6 loaves of bread at a time because they're built for that. They'll have a 500 watt motor or something like that. If you're doing a lot of bread, those are a good investment. So keep those things in mind. This is pulled away from the sides of the bowl and wrapped around the dough hook. It's going to be sticky, but it doesn't stick to your hands. So that's kind of what you're looking for. I'm going to get this out of here. My spatula, I've got a bowl here that's greased, lightly greased with olive oil. We're going to put the dough in there and let it rise in a warm place for about an hour to an hour and a half. Again, anything over 110, definitely 115, you'll start killing off your yeast. 115 will kill it. You don't want it in a hot oven or anything. You can turn on your oven and then immediately turn it off. I mean, as soon as you feel any heat, and just turn it off. You can check it. If it's over 110, wait till it cools down, and then you can cover this and put that in there, and that will work. Or you can leave the light on. The light on in your oven will help heat it too. Or if you have a pilot light in your oven, so those different things can work. Otherwise, if it's sitting in a cold, drafty place, it's not going to rise. That dough's real stretchy. That's what it's supposed to be for pizza dough. See how that's stretchy? That's the way it should be. Oh, much more nutritious than just white pizza dough. And if you're buying pizza dough mix, you're you're probably not getting much nutrition at all, and even the pop-open can kind of pizza. If you really want to bump up your nutrition in your family, and with all the viruses going around now, you need to be bumping up the nutrition in your family, and so this is just a good way to do that. And we'll let this rise for about an hour and a half and double, and we'll come back. The bread is risen up really well. What I did is I put it in the oven, just like I said, I turned it on, kept my hand in there, and the minute I felt it heating, I turned it off. And I had saran wrap on here, so the oven wasn't hot. It was just barely warm. So this rose up really well. It took about an hour and a half. So we're going to shape it down in a little bit and make it out into an oblong. And then we'll put our sausage. I've got 2 sausage links, Italian sausage, just 2. Come in the packet. That's all I need. If you want more meat, you can put more. If you want to brown off your meat, and I've got 1 whole onion cut up, I'm going to brown that off. Then we'll put I use pizza sauce. You can use like a spaghetti kind of sauce too, if you want to. But I had pizza sauce in my freezer in a couple of bags where I had some left over. I thawed them both out. And I have enough sauce to spread over my pizza. You just want enough to kind of cover it. That's about a cup in there. And then I've got my cheeses grated. Actually, they were already grated in the freezer. And I've got some dried oregano that I dehydrate from my garden. And I will put a sprinkle of that on. You can put other things on there. You can put peppers on your pizzas. You can put chicken. You can make them just like you make a pizza. But then you're going to roll it up into a pizza roll. We'll cut it, and then we'll let those rise a little bit, and then we'll bake them. So this is almost brown. I like good lean sausage because you don't want your pizza roll to be greasy. So we get a lot of grease in there. Be sure and drain some of that off. So just cook it. You want it done because it's not going to bake long enough to get it done that much in the oven. So you want your chicken or your any kind of meat in it already done. This is almost done. And then I will come back and we'll roll our dough out. We're ready to roll out our dough. You can see it's really risen up now. I've got just a tiny light dusting of flour on my mat. We're going to roll this out to a pretty good size because we're going to need to make 12 pizza rolls at least out of it. Or we'll make that many. I'm going to just degas it, kind of gently push on it, get the air out. We don't want to use any more flour than we have to. You can dust your thing with some whole wheat or with white. It doesn't make any difference, really. Not that much nutrition in that little bit of flour to make any difference. So we want to roll this out. A little bit more. It's a little sticky here. Kind of start your rolling your dough. You should always start with the shape that you want in the end. So we're going to start with an oblong shape because that's the shape we want in the end. Get this out of the way. And we want this about 20 inches long and about 12 inches wide or so. Just roll it out, turn it, roll it this way, roll this way. Avoid just rolling back and forth because it just stretches and goes back, so just roll one direction. Turn it a little bit more. This feels like really good pizza dough. You can make these vegetarian, just make them with just cheese. You can put some alternative meat in there. There's a lot of that in the market. So it's easy to make a vegetarian pizza. You can put, like I said, chicken or onions, peppers. You can put olives on it. You can do olives and cheese. You can put a little basil on there if you wanted to. I'm going to do oregano, but you could do both. Just make it really easy. And roll it out, keep it pretty even as far as the corners go. I'll just round it in. Now I've got my oven preheated to 400. You want a hot oven for pizza? A cast iron pizza pan. Thing cooks like crazy. It's so good for pizza and things like that. Set it right here, and I've just greased it lightly, just very lightly. Just when it gets hot, it stays hot. And you want that hot for pizza. Baking pizza crust, I would preheat that, but I don't for the pizza rolls. You get that hot in the oven, and you can sprinkle a little cornmeal on there, and then slide your pizza dough on. You're gonna have a great pizza. Get the shape back the way you want it. It's getting a little wonky there. I don't want that. That's probably long enough. It's pretty good size here. I've got my pizza sauce. Like I said, I had it in the freezer, so I'm just gonna put a little bit of that on. And I don't like a whole bunch of sauce because you're gonna roll this up. And I'm not a big fan of a lot of sauce even on pizza. I'm just gonna slightly rub it on there lightly. There's some sauce left over. It doesn't have meat in it. It'll go back in a bag. Flatten the bag out and put it back in the freezer. Save it for the next pizza or pizza roll because I've got too much thawed out here. Already you can see that. Doesn't take very much, but just a little more. I've got my sausage. Now this again is Italian sausage. You could use any kind you want. And I've got my onions cooked in it. I just like to cook them together and spread them out. As little or as much meat or no meat if you don't want any. And then spread that on there. Spread it around. Spread it out a little bit, and we're going to roll this up and cut it into 12 pieces. When you roll it up, start from the side and roll. Kind of keep it going as even as you can. And stretch it back a little bit as you roll. Stretch back and roll. Stretch a little bit and roll. Stretch a little bit and roll. Just keep going with that process. And when you get to the edge, what we want to do, so that's spilling out when you get that back. We want to roll it right over. Got it a little bit too full here. It'll be alright. Roll it over, and that will seal that side. Okay, I've got my pan ready, like I said, and I'm going to cut this in half. Each scraper's good to cut these. That's about half. Then we'll do half again, and half again. And then each one of these will be 3 pieces. Just put them right on your pan. Seal your edge up with your hand. You could put these in a glass pan and they could be touching if you wanted to, or you can put them on just a sheet pan. You know what? We forgot to put our cheese on. I'm going to have to unroll these. I'm not going to make you watch all that. I'm going to unroll each one and put the cheese on there and then roll it back up. That's going to be a little bit of a pain, but I want some cheese on there. So that's what I'm going to do to get it on there. I'm just going to roll it back up. Oh, I forgot the cheese. You don't want to do that. So I'm going to work on this a little bit more. And then just kind of seal up your ends on these even. Normally you wouldn't have to re-roll them. You get your cheese on there the first time. But I do want the cheese on there, so I'm going to take the time to do that. Then we're going to let them rise. I'll cover them, let them rise about 30 more minutes. And then we'll come back. Now I've got that cheese added back in there. And they're all spread out here. I made 12. Got them covered with, and I did take a tiny bit, and by the way, that cheese was mozzarella cheese. You can use different kinds of cheeses, but I used mozzarella today. And some cheeses don't work as well on pizza. Mozzarella works. There's a famous pizza company that sells their cheese in their bags. I won't say the name. But I also use that sometimes too, because we like it. But this is mozzarella. And I just sprinkled a tiny, tiny bit of oregano over the tops. And you can see that cheese is kind of running out there. I'm going to let them rise about 30 minutes. And we're going to bake them off. 400-degree oven, and it won't take long for them to bake. Not like pizza. We'll see how long it takes. Okay, we have our pizza rolls out of the oven. I baked them about 30 minutes. They look amazing. Whoops, I'll lose one there. I'll just hold it up to the camera so you can see it. They're fluffy. They're like a soft pizza dough. They're wonderful though. And I cooked them about 20 minutes and then they weren't quite brown enough because I actually cut a little piece of the dough off. It was a little too doughy. I left them about 10 more minutes. You're just gonna have to time it. Depends on how thick they are, how big you make them. And that's gonna make all the difference in how long they bake, obviously. I took that pizza sauce that I said I was gonna freeze and I decided to just keep it and poured a little bit right over the top as I eat it. Wonderful. I love pizza, kind of like a pizza breadstick and how you dip it in that pizza sauce. Then we did add our cheese in there to get it in there. But you want to do that before you roll them up, not after. It smells amazing. You've got to give these a try. If you love pizza, you're going to love these pizza rolls. I'm going to take what's left over and bag them up in a Ziploc bag, and I'll freeze some of them. But if we don't eat what we don't eat tomorrow, I may just go ahead and freeze all of them. I don't know. But if I freeze them, I'll put one in each bag so I don't have to throw out too many at one time. I don't think they'd stick together though in the freezer. But you can put one to a bag. One of these will make a meal or lunch anyway because they're so big. This one's really big. So they are so good. It smells like pizza. Kind of like, tastes like eating a pizza and a breadstick all at once. Hope you enjoyed this show and let me know how you like these. And get some whole wheat flour, fresh milled into your diet. This is full of vitamins. Even though we sifted some bran out, there still was a lot left in there. And even though we added some plain white flour, we pumped up the nutrition a whole bunch by milling and using that flour right away. So we'll see you on the next show.